Well, ladies and gentlemen, the left is doing a lot of signaling right now on what they plan to do if they ever get back power. And surprise, surprise, they plan to use the government to reward their friends and punish their enemies. And who exactly are their enemies? Well, apparently it's anybody that follows orders from the Trump administration. And how do you distinguish between a lawful order and an unlawful order? Well, once upon a time, it was a little bit clearer. You looked at things like the UCMJ or Uniform Code of Military Justice if you were in the military. But now apparently we're just going to leave it up to people like Eugene Vindman and Mark Kelly, who once they get power will just reinvent the law however they need to in order to punish people. At least that's the concern. But is it valid? Is it valid, or is this just all talk? Well, today, what we're going to try to do is establish two things. First of all, we're going to see what has the response been over the last several months with respect to Democrat rhetoric around Trump's orders, ICE operations, Department of Homeland Security. We're going to take a look at that, and then we're going to take a look at what they've been saying recently. And we're going to try to figure out what all does this mean if Democrats were to actually get enough power to pull it off. Are they just talking? Or are they serious? All that and more coming up on this episode of Making the Argument. I'm your host, Nick Freitas, back in the studio. All of us, actually. Back in the studio, my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
Hello, everyone.
And then, of course, we have our resident historian, political prognosticator, the Oracle of Virginia, Christian Hines.
Who knew that Democrats actually get to decide what's legal and illegal?
Yeah. They're just
even when they lose an election.
They're just going to go ahead and figure all that out for us. Look, this goes back to my statement before, and it's something that may be frustrating, but on some degree, it's, I guess, admirable, or not admirable, it's impressive. Maybe that's a better way to put it, is that when Democrats are not in charge, they act like they're in charge. And when they are in charge, they act like there will never be another election. So let's see if we can, make the argument here. Are we just, dang it, are we just engaged in hyperbole here, or have things escalated a little bit? So go ahead and pull up this first article here. First ever Antifa-related charges filed in attack on the Texas ICE facility. Now, read that carefully real quick. Go scroll up again to that headline. First ever Antifa-related charges filed in attack on Texas ICE facility. Is anyone else surprised that this is the first ever Antifa-related charges?
Yeah, incredibly surprising to me, considering Antifa's been doing the illegal stuff for quite a long time.
They've been beating people and making threats and damaging government property. But then again, Joe Biden, when he was president, said Antifa doesn't exist. It's just an idea. Well, an idea just had related charges filed in their very real attack on a Texas ICE facility. So again, this just demonstrates that, again, the left is willing to use violence. They believe that there's moral justification using violence. In this one, they targeted ICE agents, and I think they killed a couple of detainees, right? They killed
people that were going to be deported. They were trying to shoot the agents. It was like a sniper attack, basically.
Yeah.
And this was over the summer. But the thing is that this isn't a one-off thing. We've got a few stories that we're going to blitz through
the next one
to illustrate what's going on here. Here's a story from our home state.
Right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. A Virginia principal, that's right, a school principal, and his brother were arrested for allegedly plotting an attack on ICE agents using guns and explosives, DHS said Wednesday. Again, this is another one of those things that had this been said under the Biden administration, there probably would have been a cursory investigation. They would have decided that they were just kidding and they would have been let go. But now it's actually being taken seriously because it should be taken seriously. I had this conversation when I was speaking at Cal Berkeley a couple weeks ago. And this young student, he was respectful, but this young student was talking about how concerned he was about fascism under Donald Trump and about how concerned he was about due process of law. And I was explaining how, well, no, ICE is following due process of law with respect to immigrants. If you're here illegally, due process doesn't mean you have to be tried and convicted of being in the country illegally. It can be determined that you're here illegally, and then you can be deported. Now, if you want to accuse him of if you want to convict him of like a armed robbery, well, then yes, you have to go through a trial process. But you don't have to go through that. He's like, well, and really what this came down to is they have this vague concept of what due process is. And if they don't like something, then due process isn't being followed. But then when I pointed out, well, I'm sorry, was due process what people on January 6th were afforded? Was due process what was afforded to Donald Trump when New York State just changed the law, made it retroactive, and went after him? And it's like, well, it's like you're more concerned about rhetoric than you are actual due process of law. And it's demonstrated in things like this. What's the next one? All right, update. DHS deploys special operations after multiple violent attacks on federal law enforcement by domestic terrorists in Chicago. Another thing to understand about this is, and let's make a distinction here, because I want everyone to be clear on what are localities obligated to do versus not obligated to do, states and localities when it comes to enforcing federal immigration law. There is no requirement that state and local law enforcement have to assist in enforcing federal immigration law. And that's the way it's supposed to be. They can choose to assist, and I think they should, but they're not required legally to assist. However, when you engage in the sort of obstruction that we've seen, and the mayor of Chicago essentially came right out and talked about trying to actively obstruct the enforcement of federal immigration law, that's something entirely different. And I also want to point out that for all of the left that are screaming about the National Guard getting deployed, okay, well, the federal government has not only the authority, but the obligation to enforce federal immigration law. And when you make it clear that you're going to actively use local and state resources to engage in obstruction, you're now violating the law. And so it's perfectly appropriate for Trump to essentially determine that you are engaging, if not in directly insurrectionist activity, you are engaging in subversive activity. You are certainly engaging in obstruction. And there's going to be a lot of people saying, well, then why don't they try him for obstruction? I don't know the answer to that. I do know, I think what it is they don't want the image of arresting a duly elected mayor of Chicago, but they do want to actually get to the business of enforcing federal immigration law, and so they're bringing in additional units. But again, I think this is going to backfire on Democrats eventually. What's the next one? We got one more?
The last one is related to the recent National Guard shooting in D.C.
So we had basically an assassination attempt on two National Guardsmen from someone that was brought over from Afghanistan who had worked with the U.S. government, or at least there's a claim there. I guess there's disputing claims right there, but it looks like the preponderance evidence suggests that this guy had worked with the CIA over in Afghanistan. But he was a part of these thoroughly vetted Afghan refugees that were coming over. And can I just say, as someone that served over in Iraq, and I have interpreters that I served with that are now living in the United States, they were thoroughly vetted. Those interpreters had to go through a sponsorship program. They had to be vetted by local military that had served with them overseas. They had to go through all of that. What was happening at the end when Biden completely botched up the drawdown in Afghanistan was they were just allowing people to come in, to flood into the country. And it was this, oh, well, we owe this to them. No, we did not owe everyone who happened to work with the United States government at some point during the war in Afghanistan a free ticket to the United States, especially ones that are engaging in criminal activities. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us pointing that out, but of course we're all insensitive and horrible people. So the bottom line is, we want people to understand that when we talk about these issues, when we talk about what is going on with respect to either the left refusing to enforce the law when they actually had the power, or actively engaging in violating the law, they don't seem to have any problem with it. And why should the people that listen to the Democrats talk about this stuff? Why should the people that watched as the Biden administration allowed millions of people to illegally enter the country, why should they not expect that they can get away with behaving like this or engage in these sorts of activities when they're able to do it whenever Democrats are in power, and they've been told that they have the moral authority to do it? In fact, they have a moral obligation to do it. And that's going to lead us into the next part that we're going to talk about, which is this idea of the latest round of rhetoric. And I want to finalize the framing here. I want to talk about this. I remember a time when Democrats accused you of things that were untrue: racism, sexism, bigotry, anytime you disagree with their policies. That was an attempt to rob you of your moral authority and to make it as if your position or your perspective was illegitimate, by essentially engaging in blatant ad hominem attack. Then they moved on to this idea of, no, you're a threat to democracy. You're a fascist. You're a Nazi. That was to provide a moral framework for where they could engage in acts of violence against you and claim it was self-defense. Now we're seeing Democrats get out there and essentially signal that if you follow the orders, if you actually carry out the orders of the President of the United States, the duly elected President of the United States, if you do not sufficiently work to obstruct the President of the United States, well, then when they get back in power, they're coming for you. That's what we're going to talk about next. But before we do that, I need to say a big thank you to our good friends at Good Ranchers. And I'm going to tell you why. It's not just because we eat Good Ranchers all the time and absolutely love their product, because it is a 100% American supply chain run by wonderful people and an absolutely quality product, but because they're also making my Christmas shopping a whole lot easier this year. And this is important for two reasons. One, I don't particularly like going to the store, especially not during the holidays when everything is super, super crowded. But two, I also don't like getting people just crappy gifts for the sake of giving them a gift. Right? If I'm gonna give you a gift, I want it to be something that can actually be meaningful. And one of the things we've been talking a lot about lately, one of the things we've been enjoying lately around the holiday season, is spending more time actually sitting down and breaking bread with friends, with family, and that's what Good Ranchers does. So this year, when I send off the gift of Good Ranchers to people that I care about, I'm actually setting up a future event for them to be able to sit around the table, to be able to break bread, to be able to have those good quality conversations with loved ones. Maybe they'll invite me over and I'm actually getting myself a gift. Who knows, right? The possibilities are endless. But I do know this. If you go to goodranchers.com and you use my exclusive code Nick, not only are you going to get free meat on top of your order, but you're going to get $40 off as well, an extra $40 off. Goodranchers.com. Use my code Nick. That lets Good Ranchers know that you found out about it here. And you're going to get all those additional benefits, the free meat, all this. Your family's going to love it. Your friends are going to love it. So head over, check them out right now. Thank you again to Good Ranchers.
You almost went Trump in that beautiful
meat. It's beautiful meat. I love it. It's great. I looked at it. I said, wow, what beautiful meat.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So are the Democrats, again, are they just engaging in the typical rhetoric that we always kind of see happening? Or are they serious about this idea where if they get back into power, they are just going to go into tribunal mode and start going after anybody and everyone? And what could this actually mean? So let's go ahead and take a look at, here's my congressman, Eugene Vindman. Eugene Vindman is a veteran. In fact, I think his greatest contribution while he was wearing the uniform was kicking out members of the military, to include decorated combat veterans, people that actually engaged in the sort of combat that a guy like Eugene Vindman probably never even got close to, kicking them out for not wanting to get an experimental vaccine and celebrating it, talking about what a great job he was doing. That's right. The very men and women that were going overseas to defend this country got kicked out by this guy, who's now the representative for the 7th Congressional District of Virginia. He goes, "Hey, Secretary of War, you criming again?" That sounds like good lawyer talk. "Let there be no doubt you will be held accountable along with those that executed your illegal order." Now, here's what's interesting about this. Let there be no doubt you will be held accountable along with those that executed your illegal order. So, and this is based off of a Washington Post report, which, by the way, even the New York Times came out and said that they got this wrong. If the New York Times is correcting the Washington Post and saying, hey, this actually isn't accurate, you done know you've screwed up. But the Washington Post said, exclusive, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, that in order to kill everybody in the first strike on suspected drug boats in the Caribbean after 2 men survived, the mission commander ordered a second strike to comply with Hegseth's instructions, according to 2 sources. Okay, well, first of all, if you were looking at these people as terrorists, and they've been designated as narco-terrorists, you can kill them, first of all. Second of all, again, it was already, even the New York Times came out and said this isn't an accurate rendition of what actually took place. But here's the real question. It would be one thing if Eugene Vindman was saying, I think this is illegal, and I think it should be investigated. Now, I doubt very seriously that Pete Hegseth, they love to make him out to be just some radical cowboy. I doubt very seriously Pete Hegseth is just going out there and just randomly ordering the deaths of people.
Giving kill orders.
Yeah, giving kill orders. However, it's this, you will be held accountable along with those that executed your illegal order. Again, last time I checked, it's not illegal to kill narco terrorists and actively engaging in drug trafficking. And I do remember this. I remember when Gene Vindman was very, very mad at Barack Obama for ordering drone strikes on people that were actually American citizens overseas. Oh, wait, no, he wasn't. No, he wasn't at all. But what this actually means is, and this is important because we're going to land this up here. He's not just saying we're going to go after Pete Hegseth for issuing what Eugene has decided is an illegal order. He's saying we're going to go along with everybody who executed your illegal order. So let me get this straight. If I'm on a mission and I'm responsible for interdicting narco-terrorists and I interdict narco-terrorists, is Eugene Vindman going to haul me before a tribunal and theoretically not only prosecute me for following an illegal order, but prosecute me for murder? I mean, if you're in the service right now, this is the sort of thought process he wants in your mind. He wants you terrified of executing orders that come from the President of the United States. Now, this is the first time to do it. Do we have the example of all 6 of those?
Yeah, we have a few compilation clips to go through because it's not just some random member of the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
Now, granted, Eugene Vindman's actually a little bit of a larger name. That for those that are listening who might not know about him specifically, they've probably have heard of his brother. Mm-hmm. The whole reason that Eugene's even in Congress is because he made a name for himself as being part of the lib resistance against Trump, right?
Yeah, the guy that, exposed the phone call with Ukraine that turned out to not at all be problematic.
So here's Alyssa Slotkin. Her background's interesting. She's definitely has a deep state background, to put it lightly. She's a senator from Michigan.
Yeah.
What were you about to say about Slotkin?
Nothing. Slotkin invokes Nuremberg in her defense of Democrat illegal orders video. Well, they told me to do it. It's not an excuse. People were prosecuted. Democrats are threatening legal retaliation as an intimidation tactic. Same thing they have been doing to ICE agents.
Yeah, so listen to this, because they're just going full mask off here about their intentions. So listen to this.
Follow an illegal order, but it's very murky when you look at what is an illegal order. And if you go into morally, ethically, that's a pretty tough thing to look at and say, how do I navigate this?
Look, if you're going back to Nuremberg, right, they told me to do it, that's why I murdered people, is not an excuse. If you look at popular culture, there's you watch, A Few Good Men, we have plenty of examples since World War II in Vietnam where people were told to follow illegal orders and they did it and they were prosecuted for it. So the best thing for people to do is go to their JAG officer, their local law enforcement or a legal officer in their unit, and ask for some explanation, ask for help. And that's what we've been advising people to do.
Did she really just use a movie quote?
Yeah.
And
in
Nuremberg.
order to
Nuremberg. Example.
She talked about A Few Good Men. I'm like, that's a movie, lady.
So let's go ahead and see if we could. Yeah. So Nuremberg, A Few Good Men is a movie. So that's great. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, serving in the military, serving with ICE, serving in federal law enforcement.
Remember that movie?
Just understand that homegirl here is going to decide whether or not you pass the A Few Good Men test when it comes to following orders. And then she compares it Nuremberg. Yeah, Nuremberg was for people that were actually conducting the Holocaust, right? Not shooting narco-terrorists or doing a missile strike on a narco-terrorist boat. So, it's just real simple. You just go to your local JAG officer. Okay, let me, as someone that actually knows a little something about this, let me tell you what the process typically goes through for we'll say an artillery strike, right? But the same thing could be the same thing could be true of an airstrike. I remember I was on a training mission for this because I usually didn't serve. I didn't serve at the battalion level. I served at the ODA level or the A team level with special forces is the kind of colloquial term, but we call it the ODA. So I served, which is the basic functional unit of a special forces group. But I was doing a training mission at JRTC in Louisiana, and I served at the battalion TOC, the command center. And I've also seen this operate in Iraq as well. When they're doing a strike like this, first of all, there's usually a lot of information that leads up to actually conducting a surgical strike like they're talking about right now. This isn't just something like random strike on a boat out in the Caribbean. This isn't just some random target of opportunity. These are the sort of things that are tracked through intel. Now, can intel get it wrong? Yes. Right? But intel getting it wrong doesn't make an order illegal. That's important to understand, first of all. Second of all, in a typical talk situation or command center situation, when you're authorizing a strike, you actually have various people sitting in the area, looking at the common operating pictures, what we called it. It was like, okay, you've got operations, you've got intel, you've got, other various people, and you've got, one of the other ones you got is JAG. You've got your Judge Advocate General. And so when a coordinate would come up to strike, you would look at something, and one of the things that would bless off would be JAG saying, yeah, you're in the clear. Now, I don't know exactly what has happened in these various strikes with respect to these narco-terrorist boats, but this idea that they're just seeing boats in the Caribbean and then Pete gets on the phone and says, kill them all. Yeah, that doesn't pass the smell test with me. And
she should know better.
She does know better. That's the other part, right?
She's preying on the gullibility of the people.
She's preying on the goal, and then it's this idea. Oh, well, just ask your local JAG officer. Like, I'm sorry. Is every order that I have to execute against a terrorist organization, does every single one have to go through? Well, wait a second, sir. Before I can carry that out, I need to go call up the local JAG and make sure it was okay. And oh, by the way, if I don't do that, because I already know that JAG is part of the process in assessing these situations, am I going to be in trouble now with you? Because let's face it, this isn't just about whether or not they can convict you. Although we've seen before that Democrats don't mind bending rules to convict people that they want convicted. This is about creating a culture to where you are afraid to act. You are afraid to actually carry out lawful orders because they might come back later and decide, well, I was watching A Few Good Men and I think what you did was illegal. We're not talking about speeding tickets here. We're talking about carrying out complex operations against terrorists, right? Our guys and gals that are actually conducting these operations should not have to be thinking in their minds. They should have to be thinking in their minds, is this going to be reinterpreted when it becomes politically convenient that I did the wrong thing? All right, yes, there is such a thing as unlawful orders. Yes, you were obligated not to follow unlawful orders. But her making it out like this is easy to determine is just disingenuous as hell. What's the next one?
The next one is a compilation clip of other Democrat members of Congress kind of pushing a lot of this narrative as well. So let's listen to this.
ICE agent who's engaged in this aggressive overreach, every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified. We're going to make sure that the American people have the transparency necessary to hold people accountable when they're folks who cross the line.
Pause right there.
He will not be in office.
Okay, real quick question. When was the last time you saw a Democrat? When was the last time you saw somebody like Hakeem Jeffries get up there and say, for all of you who illegally crossed the border and then committed additional violent crimes within the United States, you will be identified. We will use the full force of the law to come after you.
Oh, never.
When do you ever see them do this?
No. They straight up kill our people and they won't do it. They won't say... they're freaking taking up collections for criminals.
The Virginia Democrats worked overtime to actually try to, and succeeded in letting convicted felons get out of jail early. That sort of aggressive rhetoric on their part about like, we will seek justice is never directed at violent criminals.
No.
It's always directed at the out group.
Yeah.
And not just like any out group, right? I mean, you can pick somebody in Papua New Guinea and they're an out group, right? No, it's always directed at a dysfunctional,
criminal
antisocial.
Element. It's almost always a criminal element.
Out group is what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it always is. It is an iron law of leftism that the worse off a person or a group of people act, the more praise and defense that the left lavishes upon them.
And look at it. They were going down to El Salvador to advocate, but Maryland Man, does everyone remember Maryland Man? Guy who was in the country illegally, guy who was associated with MS-13, guy who was associated with human trafficking, guy who apparently had beaten his wife. That was the guy that they wanted to stop everything for, to save as the model of what they were fighting against, the fascism of President Trump. It's just all too predictable at this point.
Next one is the governor of Illinois.
Yeah.
He will not be in office forever, and the Congress won't always be in MAGA Republican hands where they're just saying hands off whatever the president wants. There will be a moment when these folks are held accountable. So I've reminded them of that.
You have to follow legal orders. You are not to follow illegal orders. It was just a friendly reminder that we are a country of laws.
And what that oath requires, not only that I stand up for the Constitution myself, but that I ensure that others are doing the same, that our men and women in uniform.
This is another thing just irritates the absolute. Swearing the oath to the Constitution. Tina, you said it best. The left talks about the Constitution the way atheists talk about the Bible. It's not out of any reverence for it. It's just a useful thing to bring up every once in a while when they're trying to make an impassioned point, as if they really care about protecting the Constitution, except for your Second Amendment rights.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's
Except
just to
for your
remind you
property
what
rights.
you're bound by, but they are definitely not bound by it.
No, it was just a friendly reminder. Oh, really? Is that all it was, Mark Kelly? Because Hakeem Jeffries and other people right there in Congress are actually saying that they're going to prosecute people.
And it wasn't a friendly reminder when they were basically identifying that everything Trump's doing is, in their mind, illegal, and telling people it is your duty to do this. And if you want the American people basically to respect you, you have to do this.
Yeah. We got another one.
So, we've already gone through them. What I want to do now is show you guys what the right's reaction to all of this has been.
All right. Well, before we do that, I do have to thank our next sponsor for the show, and that is Lear Capital. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, we have certain people within government that, well, I don't know, they just consider you the enemy. And we've seen this in other places, right? Where they don't like what you have to say. They don't like, they love protesting until you're doing it on behalf of your property rights, until you're doing it on behalf of your Second Amendment rights, until you're doing it on behalf of the unborn, right? Whatever it is, if it's a conservative principle and you're protesting for it, you become a target. And one of the ways they like to target with conservatives is financially, whether it's coming after you, whether it's, I don't know, maybe debanking you. And this is why it is important to understand that when you look at your financial security and future, you need to consider things other than just the stock market, other than just fiat currency from the Federal Reserve. And that is where Lear Capital comes in, because precious metals have actually gone up exponentially over the last several years. Why? Because of rampant government inflation. That's right. If they're not coming after you legally, they're still doing things with respect to bad monetary policy that is drastically decreasing the value of the dollar. And one of the ways you can hedge against the total value of everything that you've built, everything that you've worked for, is by actually diversifying into precious metals. But you don't need to take my word for it. You can actually go to Lear Capital and find out more, because one of the things Lear is really big on is educating people on how to actually do this. You want to old physical gold and silver that you actually have in your safe at your home? Great, they can do that. Do you just want to make it a part of your 401k? Do you want to make it a part of your retirement? Great. They can show you how to do that as well. So I want you to go over there right now. Check them out, right? You can get started by calling Lear. You can call them at 800-707-4575. That's 800-707-4575. Or you can visit nick4lear.com. That's Nick, the number 4lear.com. Go check out. Again, costs you nothing to just go on there and get some information to learn how to diversify and do this. Highly encourage you to go do it. Thank you very much, Lear, for sponsoring today's show. All right. So we've seen what the left has to say about this, right? And it's a series of overt and veiled threats, not just against the president, not just against Pete Hegseth, not just against, the DHS, but no, against individual ICE officers, against individual members of the military, right? And it's just a friendly reminder that will put you in jail and ruin your life forever if you follow orders, which by all accounts were considered legal at the time. In fact, Mark Kelly, the guy talking about that, friendly reminder, he was one of those 6 that got out there and did that video. But you know what he couldn't do as he was issuing these friendly reminders? He couldn't actually reference one illegal order. He couldn't actually reference one order that actually met the legal definition, not the few good men Hollywood definition, the legal definition of an illegal order. Not one. But Let's see how the right is now responding to this.
So this is Stephen Miller reacting to that video that you just cited.
Yeah.
So let's play that video for a second. It's a minute and a half long to give some context here.
I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin.
Senator Mark Kelly.
Representative Chris DeLuzio.
Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander.
Representative Chrissy Houlihan.
Congressman Jason Crow.
I was a captain in the United States Navy.
Former CIA officer.
Former Navy.
Former paratrooper and Army Ranger.
Former intelligence officer.
Former Air Force.
We want to speak directly to members of the military
And the intelligence community.
Who take risks each day.
To keep Americans safe.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk.
This administration is pitting our uniformed military
And intelligence community professionals
Against American citizens.
like us. You all swore an oath.
To protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
But from right here at home.
Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law.
Or our Constitution.
We know this is hard.
And that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
In the Army.
Our Navy,
The Air Force.
Your vigilance is critical.
and know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
The American people need you.
We need you to stand up for our laws.
our Constitution,
And who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
don't give up.
don't give up.
Don't give up the ship.
Okay, pause real quick. I love it when I'm watching these absolute clowns say, well, the threats are coming from at home. Good. Where are they? Where's the illegal orders? Where are they? Go ahead and point to it. Don't just tell a bunch of law enforcement, intelligence agents, and military that you can't follow illegal orders. Oh, well, thanks for that. Thanks. I'm not allowed to speed either. Thanks for the friendly reminder. You're the one that prefaced all of this with the threats are coming from inside, okay? Point them out. What are the threats? And give me the illegal orders that you're not allowed to follow. Oh, was that not a part of your little thing here? Like, oh, we need our members of the military. Where were any of these people when members of our military were getting thrown out over COVID vaccines? I'm so glad that they actually recognize that we do need our military. But when our military needed them, these guys who are now holding up their own service, holding up the fact that they once held the uniform, holding up that they actually swore an oath, where were they for any of those guys and gals? Nowhere to be found. No, I take that back. They were celebrating them getting kicked out of the military. So from me to you, screw you guys. You are a shameful representation for veterans. You're right, you did swear an oath. I would love to see you live up to it at some point. How pathetic. What a joke.
Well, they were
What a
busy
joke.
replacing those people with trans military members. Is their loyalties lied with wherever the social experiments led. And so it was about replacing good soldiers with people confused about their gender.
I can't believe one of those guys was an Army Ranger.
You know what I find so disturbing about this, but also eye-opening and interesting, is that, they say don't give up the ship. What they're implying is that they're the ones that should be running the ship of state, even though they lost the election last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is. Democrats sincerely believe that they are the only ones that have the legal and moral authority to run this country, even when they lose an election. So the choice is, you can either elect Democrats and they run the country, or you elect Republicans and Democrats still get to run the country. They just run it through the bureaucracy.
Yep.
They run it through the Pentagon. They run it through the intelligence community, through the federal bureaucracy, and the judicial system. But either way, they always get to run the show. The question is just through what mechanisms. Is it either through your elected officials or is it through the unelected bureaucracy? But no matter what, they will never, I've said this a few times, they will never grant moral authority to anybody else to be in charge of anything. Because they don't believe, they fundamentally do not think that the right has a right to exist. What they will say is that no, we're against. They do. Let me put it this way: they don't recognize that they have political enemies. They believe that they have pathologies that must be eradicated from society.
Right.
Racism, sexism, bigotry, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia, all the phobias and isms in the world, right? They have to be destroyed and eradicated. That's what they believe in as progressives. And so they quite literally do not grant moral legitimacy to another political force to vie for control over the political structures of this country, let alone to change those political structures in a way that might align with their moral vision of how society should be ordered, as opposed to their moral, the Democrats' moral vision. But what's even more nefarious about all of this, at least from my perspective, is the same guys that kind of sat there and did absolutely nothing when 20 million illegal immigrants were imported into this country now want to tell me that they're standing up for the Constitution. So one party gets to import millions, tens of millions of people into this country in a cynical ploy to radically change the voting demographics of the electorate to guarantee themselves a permanent majority. They get to do that, and they get to get away with it. And then when the other party gets elected to deport the future voters that they brought into this country in a cynical ploy to break the political system and guarantee themselves a permanent governing majority, they're engaged in illegal orders. They're engaged in a violation of the Constitution. So one party that imports the third world in order to fundamentally change this country then gets to appeal to the Constitution to defend their importation of future voters. And I'm supposed to care about them appealing to the Constitution or appealing to the Declaration of Independence or appealing to the rule of law? Who gets to determine what the law is? You showed me through COVID and through the Biden administration that there is no such thing as the rule of law. Laws are written by men, they're interpreted by men, they're enforced by men, and you've claimed absolute moral authority for you to do all three of those things yourself, no matter what the outcome of an election is. So what you've told me is that, what this all is? It's all about power. That's all that politics is. It's just a power play. And whoever gets to mask their desire for absolute power under some sort of veneer of moral legitimacy gets to be in charge of running the thing. And they've been far more effective at that than us, because our side for a long time actually did believe in these things, actually did genuinely want to defend these things at the same time that they were subverting them.
The thing is I have not given up on this concept of the rule of law. I just don't believe that they care about it. And the big question that we're all asking ourselves right now is, the rule of law is a very, very powerful thing when the vast majority of people agree to it. It becomes very, very difficult to maintain when an entire political party just takes it or leaves it whenever it's convenient. They still use it. It's like, what's the other thing? They wear it as like a skin suit and then demand that you still respect it, even though when they're willing to subvert it whenever it's inconvenient for them. I love it when they talk about the various authorities of government without ever talking about the responsibilities. You don't just the federal government just have the authority to enforce immigration law. They have the responsibility to do it. They don't just have the authority to defend our borders. They have the responsibility to do it. So when you guys actively sit by, because Ranger Jason Crow there voted with Joe Biden 100% of the time, when you actively sit by and allow that to happen because you find it politically beneficial for yourself, despite what the rule of law says, despite what the responsibilities of the federal government are, why am I supposed to now come back and look at you offering up the Constitution as anything you take seriously? I don't. This is, I can't emphasize this enough. I am at the point right now where I will get angry when they do something like this, because these are guys that are, once again, they're holding up their military service and they're holding up their oath to the Constitution as if it's something that they genuinely cherish, when I feel like it's just convenient for them. That makes me angry. But more and more, I will write something on X or I'll do a video and they'll come in and start to comment, right? And they'll try to make some facsimile of an argument. I'm like, no, you don't understand. I don't care. I used to care about the arguments, because if you made an argument, I wanted to make a reverse argument. I wanted to address your issue. What I have learned is you don't care how good my response is. You don't care if I have facts or evidence. You don't care if I'm logically consistent. You don't care if I can demonstrate why what I believe is accurate or in line with the Constitution. You don't care. Because the moment I do make a good argument, well, that's detrimental to what you want, which is exactly what Christian said. Power. You've already decided you're the good guys. That's what's so important to understand about this. They've already decided they're the good guys, and they've already decided we're the bad guys. There is no such thing as, oh, wait, here's the evidence to prove you wrong. That's not even a consideration. This is why I said the day Charlie Kirk got murdered. This is the part where people start to wake up to the idea that this is not just a civil debate among fellow countrymen. The things we want are not just different, they're diametrically opposed. And I do not believe that we should just give in to the moral framework that they've created. But by the same token, I'm not going to pretend like if I just make a good enough argument or show enough evidence, they're going to come around. When you prove yourself completely obtuse to any sort of evidence which could demonstrate that what you have just done is incorrect, and the only value you give to your argument is whether or not it's successful at achieving power for yourself, you've shown me who you are.
The fundamental problem, you said it earlier, is that they've already decided what the final outcome is going to be. And so anything that gets to that final outcome is fair game.
Mm-hmm.
And the final outcome is they are the ones that get to run everything.
Yeah.
No matter what. It doesn't matter how many elections you go through. It doesn't matter how many court challenges you have. They believe that nobody else has the right to run this country other than them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I said, like, the left does not recognize the right or Republicans or conservatives, whatever phrase you want to use. The left does not recognize the other side as being co-equals within this country that has a competing definition for shared end states.
Yeah.
They don't grant them moral legitimacy to have that. And I remember for years when Nick was in the House of Delegates, and he would get up on the floor and he would say, Nick had some incredible speeches over the last 10 years. And one of the speeches that you would give quite often was, it would open up with saying, we all believe that, we want the same end state. We want people to be happy, healthy, prosperous, and free.
Uh-huh.
And we disagree on
how to get there.
And eventually, I noticed over the years that like when Nick was first in office, this was like 2016. Before Trump even got elected, he gave this speech a couple times. And I noticed, like, after like 2019, especially after 2020, he stopped giving that type of speech.
I did it like one more time, I think it was like 2021 or something like that. And it's like I said, and I remember talking to Tina, and Tina was like, "Do you still believe that?" And I remember looking back at one point and being like, "I don't anymore. I just don't anymore."
And
look, it's not because I didn't want to believe it.
I know that you wanted to believe it.
They convinced me of how wrong I was.
The conversation, when Nick first got elected to the legislature, part of the reason that Nick and I would have these like 3-hour conversations in his office. And I remember the type of conversations that we were having in like 2016 and 2017. It was a different political environment than today.
Oh my God.
And it was always policy. It actually was not, in retrospect, it was philosophy, but we had kind of assumed that certain first order questions had already been answered. And so it was like, okay, how do we get Virginia going? How do we grow the economy? How do we make people safer? How do we give people more educational opportunities? It was always policy oriented. It wasn't like, these people are the enemy and they want to destroy us and we have to defend ourselves. We genuinely, and I say this as like an ex-libertarian, like Mr. Libertarian, like, I get this feeling, and I'm sure that Nick, I'm sure that you agree, that like we genuinely thought that we were having a civil debate with fellow countrymen that wanted the same thing as us, and we disagreed on mechanisms to get there. That was the mindset when you first went to Richmond.
We each came to the conclusion that was no longer true
at
different points.
Mm-hmm.
I remember looking at Nick probably 6 years ago, being like, I don't believe that anymore. And he was like, no, I've I know
I
a few
didn't
of
believe it
them.
about everybody. I
Yeah,
believed it
it's
about
like
some
I
of
know
them.
a few of them, but now it's just it's every single. And I've gotten a lot of flack for saying this, but it's every single run of the mill Democrat believes this way now. It's not just a handful. It is absolutely mainstream on the left to view it this way, where one person is literally an evil enemy and we are the virtuous, good guys. And at some point we had to finally recognize that that's the way they believed. And we have some Republicans that it's like they can see all of this happening around them, but they are still stuck in this mindset of, no, these are my countrymen. And they can't handle feeling like they're disconnected or feeling like there's negativity between them and a fellow countryman. So they will like fall all over themselves and very apologetically talk about how I know that you're really a good person and I know that these are just political differences. And I called up, we have one dude, he's like, I called up the local Democrat in my county because he's the chairman of a Republican the Republican committee in that county. And I said, I know you're one of the best human beings I know. And we need to, come together and blah, blah, blah. And he just basically spewed all this stuff about how wonderful this Democrat was. And I just told him, I'm like, you refuse to recognize what time it is. And I can't really help you there because you're lying to yourself. You're not just lying to everybody else. You're lying to yourself about what time it is. And I can't do anything for you at this point. And that is kind of where there's a certain segment of the Republicans who, whether it's they want to get reelected or they just don't like feeling like people don't like them, they just can't handle being disliked.
Well, they don't, nobody wants to live in an environment where you actually feel like your neighbor secretly despises you.
But it doesn't make it untrue. And that's the problem.
That's the problem.
They would rather be deceived.
We were having a fight. We were having a fight about like going back in for a special session. And, I was somebody that was saying we shouldn't be here. Like we should show up to ask whatever questions we need to do in order to set a legal precedent for lawsuits that we're going to file against them. But then we should leave.
Yeah.
I said, well, no, we need to stay here and do our job. I said, you're not doing the job you were sent here by your representatives to do. I promise you, you are adding legitimacy to what they're doing.
Yep.
So insofar as we're doing our job, do it and then leave. And we had this argument and there were decent cases to be made for why we should stay and ask certain questions. I will concede to that. But it was, well, do two wrongs make a right? I'm like, you don't get it. You are not arguing with your good buddies from 20 years ago. Wake the hell up.
Yeah. The Virginia way is dead.
All right. Their attorney general, their candidate for attorney general was sitting here fantasizing about Todd Gilbert's kids dying.
Kids he had met.
It's like,
he knew these people.
When are you going to get, and here's the crazy part. Jay Jones was considered one of the moderate Democrats. Do you understand? Now, I'm sure all of us have a friend or an uncle or a grandpa or someone like that well, they were just a Union Democrat back in the day. Don't care. What their party represents now is this. So if they're voting for it, understand something. They might be really uncomfortable with their political party doing horrible things to you. They might find that frustrating. And they'll vote for it anyway. So stop pretending anymore. It is what I don't recall at any moment me demanding that the Democratic Party pick up this mantle and make it a core part of their philosophy. Mm-hmm. They chose it all by their lonesome. They educated it within our schools and university systems. They pushed it within Hollywood. They pushed it within the media. They pushed it within journalism. They pushed it within culturally shaping institutions. They elected it. They gave it power, and they celebrated as they carried out that power. I had nothing to do with any of that except opposing it. So you don't get to blame me for what they picked. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. So again, They have never, ever had a problem with their statements, positions, or actions offending us.
No.
Not once. They celebrate it. And our response is always to try to keep things calm, try to keep things, cordial, and they use it against us.
So when we ask what the right's response is on this, I will say, I believe part of the response is going to be, you're going to see a bunch of Republicans tripping all over themselves to just, I don't have any nice words to say.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just going to see them doing what they do. And I'll leave it at that, because I have a lot of other words in my head.
We're just going to be cowards.
Unfortunately, we're back to a point where those first order political questions have to be re-answered again. And I think that this is one of the biggest mistakes that conservatives by and large made over the last 40, 50 years is that they kind of assumed that you don't ever revisit those questions.
Yeah.
And so what we need to be doing is fusionist Reaganism, talking about free markets, lower taxes, trade deals, and I say this like I'm denigrating these things. I still support.
Reagan was making the arguments he was making at a time where people on both sides of the aisle believed those things.
Yeah.
Where the majority of the Democrats...
He was making those arguments when those kind of first order questions about who belongs to the polis, what is an American, what is the who gets to decide these type of questions? Does one side claim absolute moral legitimacy for themselves and completely deny moral legitimacy to anybody that disagrees with them? No, those type of existential political disputes didn't exist in the 80s and 70s.
Even in the physical.
Although under the surface they did. You saw it in in academia. There were the beginnings, and we've talked about this on the podcast. It was the
undercurrent. But one thing I will say is, to show you how far we've come, when Ronald Reagan was shot, some of his biggest political opponents went and visited him in the hospital, hoping to make sure that he was okay. They wanted to know he was okay. They didn't like that this happened. Well, now you've got, they're just sad that you missed, or sad that you didn't finish the job. The left wants you totally dead. Even just the most moderate of them want you dead.
Can we admit something here, right? Reagan got a lot done in his 2 terms. He never once had a Republican-controlled Congress.
But he didn't have to.
So he had Democrats that were anti-communist. He had Democrats that were pro-life. He had Democrats that were pro-gun. All of them were pro-traditional marriage, right, at that point.
Yeah, and
right?
they're all extinct now.
So just understand that, again, the Democratic Party, a lot of this started a long time ago. But this sort of remaking of the Democratic Party, they chose this.
They chose to become what they are. The reason I bring this up is because the right for so long has been stuck in this 80s mindset. Yeah. And I'm bringing this up not to denigrate the choices that the Republicans made in the 1980s, because it was under the assumption that certain things would hold that obviously did not hold.
Yeah, it's dead. That old way is dead.
And when Republicans continue to invoke the principles of 40 whatever years ago, they're missing the fact that the reason that younger people on the right have just become much more reactionary than their parents or grandparents is because their political environment that they've grown up in is very different than the environment that their parents grew up in the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
And in the 80s or 90s, you had broad bipartisan consensus. You did not have one side claiming absolute moral superiority and denying the idea that they had, maybe enemies isn't the right term, political rivals. Instead, it's no, you are an evil person and we're just going to destroy you. And when we get in charge, we're going to imprison you. And all of these things that we were talking about today, right? That didn't exist in the 80s and 90s. And I think that conservatives as a movement just never thought that these type of, again, first order existential questions would ever appear in this country. That these were the type of things that were answered in the Revolution, or at the very least in the American Civil War or the 2 World Wars, again, about who belongs to the polis?
Yeah.
What is its purpose? What is an American? These questions that aren't policy questions, they're the foundations that policy is built upon.
They're fundamental agreements necessary for high trust societies. This is one of the things. I mean, again, one of the things that's most pernicious about what they're doing right now is that This is about them signaling what they intend to do once they retake power. And so they want to do two things. They want to create conditions where people are constantly worried about what happens to them if they execute lawful orders. Keep in mind, they keep saying unlawful orders. Who is going to decide it was an unlawful order? What they're saying is, what they're telling everybody is, you're not going to be in power forever. When we're in power, we will decide. Mm-hmm. We will decide after the fact, right? It doesn't matter if it was determined legal when Republicans were in power. When we're in power, we'll decide if it was legal. So it's going to have a cooling effect right now. But in the future, it's also letting both their own voters know, because their own voters want blood. And it's also letting them know that, yeah, this is how we plan to govern. Now, Republicans, to Tina's point, there's going to be some Republicans, well, we just, cooler heads need to prevail. Shut up. They are telling you what they're going to do.
Yeah. Those Republicans are as useless to me, as a Democrat. It's like you're no better than a Democrat because you're just a weenie. And I'm so sick of that.
You could understand that mindset 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You could understand that mindset.
But now it's just cowardice now.
You could excuse that mindset 15 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago.
Well, in this,
it's gotten to a point now where, like, again, looking from my perspective, I can understand this mindset a generation ago. I could excuse this mindset 10 years ago.
Not anymore.
I can't excuse it anymore.
It's two options. You're either so ignorant that you don't know what time it is, or you do know what time it is and you're just a coward.
And you're just complicit.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's, look, do not underestimate 10 years as an elected official. I'm going to tell you right now, do not underestimate the willingness of certain Republican officials to do whatever they need to do to cozy up to the other side in order to get their little budget amendments passed. When they are campaigning, they will talk about life, they will talk about guns, they will talk about all this, and they will vote. When it comes up to the floor, they'll vote the way they need to be able to justify that record. But they will be the biggest cowards in order to make sure their budget amendments get through. Mm-hmm. Because that's how they go back and say, oh, look, I brought home the bacon. It's like, the Commonwealth is changing in ways that we're not going to be able to correct for in 2 decades. And you sat there and cozied up to these people.
But you got your budget amendment, so you can get reelected now.
This guy, different Stephen Miller, Red Steez on X, I thought he made a really good point here. He said, if you've been paying attention to this, what they are doing is going from don't follow illegal orders to we will decide which orders are illegal when we're back in charge. So you better just not follow any of Trump's orders or else you might be prosecuted. Another fun barrier broken by the norms crowd. Yep. And understand something. Here's the part you need to understand about this. It's not like pointing this out is going to change any of their minds. That's the other thing that I've really been hammering on. It's not as if it's not as if one of them is going to say, you know what, that's a pretty good point. If we do it this way, you're kind of upsetting the entire order of the way that we have the executive branch done, and you're going to create conditions to where you could have some really serious due process implications. They don't care. They don't care. I remember this so vividly going in before we were going to have debates on abortion or debates on guns or whatnot. And I would have some of the most well-meaning, nicest people come to my office who had written out these carefully crafted and thought out arguments and be like, well, Nick, you just need to say this. And I'm looking at these people and it's like, you realize it's not going to change anything, right?
It's the equivalent of like, we've got to come up with the most ironclad legal argument to stop the Mongols from sacking our village.
Right.
But this is illegal.
Yeah.
What's the quote? Yeah. We were bringing this up before we went live. There's this famous instance in Roman history. I believe it was the siege of what was it? the oh man, I think it was the siege of Messina. This was like during the period of the crisis of the Roman Republic, and Pompey was besieging the city, and it was filled with Greeks, colonists in Sicily.
Yeah.
And they pointed to, during the siege, they pointed to some like ancient treaty from like the Punic Wars of like, well, the Romans are supposed to like be providing protection for the city, not besieging it. And Pompey's reply was, "Don't quote laws to us. We carry swords."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's become that.
Yeah.
And what this has shown to, I think, a lot of conservatives over the last, from my perspective, it's been 5 years. COVID was really the COVID and the Biden administration is what really red-pilled me more than anything else. Mm-hmm. Is that it's not to say that there's this nihilistic interpretation of how the world works and that power is the only thing that matters. Because if you take it to that conclusion, you can get anything from the Soviet Union to Nazi Germany to North Korea, right? It's just power, right? And whoever wields the power, gets to decide things. What it is that it is not sufficient to have good policies, good principles, a correct moral worldview if you don't have the power to defend or in some cases impose those standards. And so it's not that right doesn't matter. It's that right can't triumph over might because triumphing implies might.
Yeah.
And so I think that a lot of conservatives don't approach it from that perspective. They say, no. It's the law is supposed to determine who's wielding the sword. But again, like the Pompey example is perfect here. It's like you can quote to your norms, your principles, what should be done all day long, but that's not going to stop the barbarian horde. Not that Pompey was a barbarian, but that's not going to stop the barbarian horde from like sacking and pillaging your city. You need to be able to defend that which you want to uphold. And you have to be willing to wield power to do it.
There's a phrase attributed to George MacDonald. Here, let me see if I'm going to go ahead and quote it out here. To give truth to him who loves it not is to only give him more multiplied reasons for misinterpretation. And if you think about it, what is the 4-step process we hear every time we bring up something? Oh my gosh, this is happening. No, it isn't. I show you incontrovertible proof that it's happening. Why do you care if it's happening? And I usually stop them right there. I'm like, wait a second. You said this wasn't happening. If you didn't think I should care in the first place, that should have been your first response. Your first response should have been, who cares? But you didn't. You said, that's not happening. And then I showed you it was, and then you asked me, who cares? You know why I care. That's why you told me it wasn't happening. And then it's, it's happening, but it's a good thing. And then what's step 4?
Why are you not celebrating this thing
if you don't celebrate this happening, you're a bad person. What is that except for more multiplied reasons for misinterpretation? Right? It's this idea of I will interpret whatever you say, whatever, in order to achieve my goals and objectives. Period. The end. Right? We keep, but here's the truth. Doesn't matter. If the truth is inconvenient to the end state, the truth becomes the enemy. We keep appealing to it. Now look, I don't think we should stop appealing to the truth. In fact, I wrote this out earlier today. I was like, the problem with this idea of I don't like what the left is doing, and so therefore whatever they do is the opposite of what they want is good. It's inversion, as Christian coined it. No, that's not good. It is not good enough for me to just identify evil. I must also pursue truth.
Right.
Well, again, I think we made the I think we've made the argument. I'm sufficiently satisfied with our argument here, but I think again, what needs to be understood, there's a special election going on in Tennessee right now, for the 7th district, which also represents, I think, parts of Nashville, and it's a lot closer than it actually should be. It's like 48. The polling's showing 48 to the Republican, 46 to the Democrat. The Democrat is called the AOC of Tennessee, like socialist, woke, went on and talked about how much she hates things like country music and everything else that like Nashville represents. And yet, 46% right now polling for her. That means like every Democrat that plans to show up for a special doesn't care about any of those things. And so this is the part where, again, it's about understanding what happens when people who have adopted this mindset and adopted this worldview, what happens when they get power. They view the whole wielding of power very, very differently. And it's about time that we both recognize that, but also respond accordingly. And we're actually going to be doing a whole episode on what does responding accordingly look like as we are about to close up our series on what should the right want. Because I heard a particular commentator who I shall not name say that it's not about liberty, it's about order. Well, I've got some problems with that as well. But I will say this, I do have problems with the people that say it's all just about liberty. And I have a lot of problems with the people who say it's just about order. And so we'll be talking more about what should it be all about. I also want to let everybody know that as much as you all like the coffee mugs, you've said for a while now, yeah, Nick, but what about what you put in the coffee mug? And we have finally launched our own Nick's Ugly Mug Coffee. Our first blend just came out. Brew around and find out. So if you want to be, patriotic quicker, definitely go check out the link in the description for
get a subscription so that you don't run out.
Yeah, brew around. But yeah, the last thing you want to do is run out of your go juice when it's time to actually throw down.
It is catastrophic if I run out of coffee in my house.
It is a little bit. I'm not going to say I'm afraid of my wife. But if she runs out of coffee, let's just say we view reality differently.
I tasted a ton of coffee to get this coffee right.
She did.
And so
if
you guys don't like the coffee, then you don't like what I like.
And if we have a good power, we will punish you for it. No. Once again, thank you all very much for joining us. It is great to be back in the studio. We should be back in fairly consistently for the next several weeks and through the Christmas season. But once again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to our sponsors. Go check out that coffee, get some brew around and find out. Like I said, Tina spent a lot of time went through. She was meticulously going through and making sure that it was roasted correctly and to give you that smooth, bold jolt of caffeine that you need to go retake America. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next episode.